Welcome to the Pacific Research Institute Next Round podcast. As you can see, we're trying something a little bit different with Next Round. After nearly 10 years of having this podcast, we started way back in 2017, and believe it or not, our first guest was Congressman-elect James Gallagher. We're going to talk about his election and all the other interesting elections from yesterday, as we tape this on Wednesday afternoon, on the first of the reimagined Next Round. And with me, of course, as always, is our friend, PRI Communications Director Matt Fleming. How are you today, Matt?
I'm good, although I feel a little bit old now that you just said 2017 was nearly a decade ago. But
yes, it was indeed. So this is our primary election post-mortem, but it really isn't a post-mortem. It's more like the primary election halftime report, because as we tape this, we have about 50-ish% of the vote counted statewide. We expect there's going to be another 3-ish million, maybe a little more votes that will be counted in the coming weeks. So today we're going to go through the governor's race, we're going to go through the LA mayor's race, some of the other hot races that we were following. So let's start with the governor's race. It was the race that no one could get into. It was the race we predicted, or I predicted really, at one point that all you need to do is get to 12 to make the top two, and I was half right. All you needed to do was get to 25 to make the top two. And for all the wildness of the governor's race, and we were going to have 2 Democrats, we were going to have 2 Republicans, all the ins and outs, it actually was kind of a boring, predictable ending. What's your main takeaway of where we're at right now at about halftime of counting the votes?
I think you're right that it was boring and predictable. I guess it wasn't entirely boring. We did have the front runners, former chief of staff and former campaign manager, are pleading guilty to corruption. And the prior front runner, Eric Swalwell, was accused of rape and other sexual misconduct. So it wasn't entirely boring, but it was filled with lots of great oppositional research. The get out of my effing shot, lots of stuff about Tom Steyer's, how he made his money. So it was exciting in that sense, but to your point, where are we now? It looks like it's going to be Steve Hilton and Hilton-Becerra. I think that there is a statistical chance that Tom Steyer could come in and usurp Steve Hilton, but I think it's a very, 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 very long shot. So
let's explain that statistical point, because the vote that we have left, the experts, the pundits, the people Matt would deride as experts and pundits, basically agree that the vote that we have remaining is going to skew heavily blue. And so we don't know how blue it's going to skew, but if you take that at its face value, well, a Steve Hilton, who I think was, about 8 points ahead of Steyer as of where we are right now, well, if you have a Tom Steyer really outperform where Hilton is at, he could catch up pretty quickly. So it is a mathematical possibility that you still could have 2 Ds in the top election. The other part to this, right, is it's probably pretty clear Hilton-Becerra will finish first when all of the votes are counted.
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I think that's probably right. I think, Hilton was at 25%, 24%.
Something like that.
And then Bianca was at 11, 12. So what is that, 35?
Something like that.
They could pick up another couple points unless there's major movement with NPP and Democrats voting for Republican. Chances are good Republicans kind of max out around 40, 42%. So expect to see the share of Republican vote kind of not getting very far past that total. But yeah, I think you're probably right. I think it's going to be Becerra, and then it seems like it'll probably be Hilton right behind him.
So the sound, of course, you're hearing when you hear that Steve Hilton made the top 2, most likely, is a lot of sighs of relief being expressed at Republican headquarters across the state of California. So now that we have, I don't know that it was the race people were clamoring for, even though the top three vote getters got, something, close to 70% of the vote or so. What is a Becerra Hilton general election going to be like? I mean, I think the conventional wisdom would be that, Hilton on a good night is going to get 40 or 41%. Hilton on a bad night is going to get about 38%, and all the campaigning he does is not going to matter for a heck of a lot. How does a general election look to you on day one of the general election?
I think it's going to look pretty boring. I think that Becerra will do just enough to look like he cares, but he won't do anything more than that, largely because he doesn't have to. And why force an error if you don't have to? The truth is, he has all the advantages in the world of winning. I'm not trying to say he's definitely going to win because things happen, and I'm not a fortune teller. But if historical trends hold, he's going to skate into this. But he can't look like he doesn't care too much. So he'll have to show up to one or two debates probably. He will have to do some campaign events, but I don't expect him to do too many things that could force an error. And he has kind of a dismissive attitude, which the more you put him in front of people, the more he will look like he's not taking it serious. So I think expect him to do just as little as possible publicly, and expect Steve Hilton, who's proven to be a pretty good provocative campaigner, expect him to do as much as possible to try to bait Becerra into even engaging with him.
And of course, the debates that we will have, will be on a Tuesday afternoon at 2 in the afternoon at the Whittier Rotary Club. They will not be primetime television. Let's, where we can have a postmortem, or really a eulogy, is for our gubernatorial candidates who we don't have to kick around anymore. So I know you are shedding the most tears over the really about 1% or less showing from our superintendent of public instruction, Tony Thurmond. When you look back at the Thurmond campaign, what will be your greatest takeaway?
Right now, he's running neck and neck with Eric Swalwell, who dropped out of the race in disgrace. Nothing warms my heart more. I feel bad having this much disdain for one particular person, but truthfully, for 8 years, he's been an absolute terrible superintendent of public instruction. K through 12 education in the state is not doing well, failing generations of students, and he's done nothing to change that even a little bit. He's been so bad, in fact, that, and forgive me to all of our listeners who've had to hear me go through this before, but I just can't stop once I get started.
It's your last time to get to do it.
Hopefully it's our last time talking about Tony Thurmond. But he's been so bad that Gavin Newsom in the budget proposed just eliminating the office entirely, which I don't think he has the power to do. But the fact that he even suggested it just shows what a stunning disaster Tony Thurmond has been. And there is no one less deserving of a promotion besides perhaps Gavin Newsom. There's probably no one less deserving of a promotion than Tony Thurmond. And he's been running for 3 years now, which I was stunned when I figured that out. It's just what an abject failure he's been, his candidacy has been. And again, like I said, it warms my heart that he is running neck and neck with a guy who dropped out months ago over allegedly raping someone.
3 big stories that were a common theme being covered in the governor's race. One of them was Matt Mahan and the supposed rise of Matt Mahan, the sensible moderate and the fellow who he saw the real quality of life and cost of living problems, and he was focused on problem solving and not ideology. Yet, that's not what voters were buying this election. Why do you think that is? Because if you ask voters about all of these issues, crime, homelessness, etc., they say they want action. They want, in many cases, the types of solutions that were talked about by a Matt Mahan, yet he got about 5% of the vote. What went wrong for Matt Mahan?
I think he got off on the wrong foot by being critical of Gavin Newsom, even though I don't think he said anything that was offensive. He certainly didn't attack Newsom personally, but he attacked Newsom's results, which is really just acknowledging reality. But apparently with the larger Democratic electorate in California, that rubbed many of them the wrong way. Gavin Newsom still retains a pretty high approval rating in the state.
And among Democrats.
Among Democrats, yeah.
Yes.
No idea why, but
It is what it is.
yeah. Labor actively campaigned against him. I don't know how much that had an effect. Labor leaders are trying to, claim the scalp. I think that at least the fact that they weren't even engaging on him to help him, that alone is sort of a net negative for a Democratic candidate. But the fact that they were actively going against him doesn't help. He's from an area that is one of the largest cities in the country, but it's kind of a backwater in terms of California politics. That didn't help. And then he was backed by Silicon Valley billionaires, which are his constituency. But apparently that is something that people don't like. But the truth is, at the end of the day, I think he didn't excite people because he didn't attack Trump enough, which, look, if you are a Californian and you want to see anything change, anything improve, you have to stop the fixation on Donald Trump. Like that's just, it can't be, they're single issue voters now, and there has to be other things that you care about. Even if you don't like Trump, there have to be other things you care about. And it just seems like he never really took off. And he was the most polished candidate in the debates. He had executive experience. He actually solved some problems in San Jose. And but yeah, it's not what voters were looking for, apparently.
Another thing that, pundits kind of brought this point up, and I didn't think that this is the case. Well, I think it kind of explains in somewhat what happened to Mahan was this sense of Democratic voters wanted a winner, and they wanted a fighter. So the fighter makes sense. I didn't think real people vote that way. That's how Sacramento insiders and political people think. But if you look at the numbers and you look at how many votes were returned these last couple of days before the election, well, they may be onto something with that theory.
Maybe. I mean, I definitely think, I don't know if this is the point you were trying to get at, but I definitely think voters at large do think about wanting a fighter. I think that's something that's consistently showed up in polling for Democratic candidates. They want a fighter. As we've talked about, I don't know how effective any of these fighters have ever actually been at fighting.
In their own mind.
In their own mind, they're really effective, but Donald Trump is here 12 years later, 10 years later, and
not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yes,
right?
So if they're fighting Trump, they're not doing a very good job of it. But beyond that, I don't know. I mean, that's interesting. I wonder if there'll be any exit polling that kind of suggests that. But it does seem like people were holding their votes. There was a lot of activity, a lot of political campaign activity in between the time voting started, ballots dropped, and yesterday. And so I wonder if people also were just kind of waiting to see what happened, because I think Becerra has basically been the front runner, presumably, since ballots have dropped, but there's been lots of oppositional research. There's been lots of twists and turns throughout this campaign. And
lots of negative ads against Becerra.
And people might have just been trying to hold on and just sort of seeing what happened. I also think the narrative spun by a Democratic so-called expert that 2 Republicans were going to make it through was an absurd premise.
Silly.
Again, kind of like Steyer coming up. It was statistically possible.
Yes.
But it was improbable.
Yes.
To be fair, I think that 2 Republicans getting through was probably more probable than Steyer getting up at this point, but not much more probable. So I think some people were just kind of waiting to see how they could gamify their ballots. But that's the other thing I think you're going to start hearing about a lot more. There's already been a movement from our friend Stephen Biglio and our other friend Ron Nearing, former chairman of the California Republican Party, to get a ballot measure up to repeal the top 2. And I think you're going to hear a lot of people talk about the merit of that. There might be a lot of disagreement about what replaces it. I'd probably like to see partisan primaries come back. But I think you'll see a lot more talking about that, because the idea that the voters are gaming things out that way, it really isn't like democracy at its finest. I had friends, my mom and friends of mine who aren't in politics asking me questions, and I'm like, just vote for who you want.
That's right.
Don't vote because you think this person might do this or might do whatever.
That's
Vote
right.
for who you want. Who do you think represents your interests best?
Right.
And certainly, of course, I'm always willing to give my suggestion of who I think that is.
We always have an idea or two on that front.
I got one candidate at least 12 votes, but that's
right.
it.
Well, and to that point too, we'll get into it a little later. The results of one congressional race may give some fire to the effort to repeal the top two. Another kind of big storyline throughout the governor's race was Tom Steyer. Tom Steyer spent over $200 million of his own money. I saw an estimate now he's over $1 billion spent promoting himself in politics in his various runs for office.
Who says America is not the greatest country in the world? Imagine being
That's
so
right.
rich that you can spend $1 billion to lose
And
countless races.
shrug your shoulders.
Shrug
right?
your shoulders. America, land of the free. I love it.
I mean, if I were Mrs. Steyer, I might say, where's our vacation home? Where's our Ferrari? But that's a whole nother matter. California has had its share of rich candidates running before. Meg Whitman, most famously, Al Checkey before that, and others. And there seems to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, although he did not spend tens of millions of dollars of his own money on his campaign. Carly Fiorina, right? But there seems to be really...
the rest of them just got rich while in office.
That's right.
Sorry,
That's right.
last joke.
That's right. It seems to be that Californians don't like rich people trying to, quote, buy an office. And Steyer seemed to have kind of a ceiling throughout this campaign of there's really only so far a billionaire could go, and especially among Democratic voters. What went wrong with Tom Steyer?
I don't think anything went wrong with him. I think there's a ceiling to his
Aside
appeal.
from his ideas.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's a kind of like Mahan. I think there's a limit to how much Democratic voters can support him. Running that I'm the billionaire who will rein in billionaires is a weird campaign theory, and he made all of his money on private prisons and fossil fuels, which doesn't personally
Sounds good to me.
Doesn't personally bother me.
Right.
I mean, I think there are maybe more honorable industries you can invest in, but certainly there's nothing. I like locking up prisoners, and I like driving my car. So I'm fine with those two things. But all of that just highlights this inconsistency that he had in his campaign. He's running as a pure progressive, but he's not, and I could get more cynical than that. And I think that they don't like old people, and he's really old, and he's corny, and they see videos of him dancing, and it's like...
I thought he kind of looked like, to give an old person reference, I thought he kind of looked like the famous comic character Mr. Magoo. Youngins who are watching, Google that, and you'll see what I mean.
And I don't know that Becerra is necessarily any younger, but Becerra is like your generic Democrat. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit out of favor at the moment, but I can see why largely people have coalesced around him.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say, watching Monday night, there was a little clip that went viral on social media of Tom Steyer, in another cringy moment, went to a gay club in West Hollywood to kick off Pride Month. And he, was doing his, I don't know what he was doing, but the 10 or 12 people that looked like they were there, you couldn't help but think, I bet every one of those 10 or 12 people was paid to be at this event.
Totally. I mean, he hired campaign consultants, some of whom I think pretty highly of in terms of their abilities. And, I'm like, he paid you a lot of money for this. And, as someone who worked in politics, like, yeah, candidates pay you, and then you back them up, and sometimes you get Stockholm syndrome where you actually start believing in them. But with Steyer, I just think he paid a lot of people a lot of money, and he did champion a lot of the issues that a lot of progressives care about. Whether he was the right messenger for it or not, I think it's pretty obvious he wasn't. But from if I put myself in, if I put like my progressive hat on, which doesn't fit, but if I had it on, I could see like the appeal from campaign staffers trying to get him across the finish line, because once in office, presumably he would push for policies that they care about.
And lastly, the rise and fall, and not really rising again, of Katie Porter. She had probably the most viral moment, if you discount legal incidents and incidents of inappropriateness. Katie Porter had the interviews seen around the state, the kind of lecturing to Julie Watts from CBS, and followed by, of course, our favorite video, Getting Out of My Shot, and never recovered from that as best as she tried. In the debates, when you watched her, if you were a progressive, well, I don't know why you wouldn't gravitate to her, because she was clearly heavily medicated, but was giving you a solid policy answer on every question that she was asked. She tried to make fun of the Get Out of My Shot in an ad that was terrible, probably the worst ad of the campaign season, and finished, the one-time front runner of the race finished at about 5% of the vote.
She's running neck and neck now with Mahan, which I find remarkable, because Mahan seemed competent. Katie Porter is terrible in so many ways. But you're right. I mean, she's obviously a brilliant lady. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And she's articulate. She is, when she latches onto something, I mean, she really goes after it. She attacks ideas she doesn't like with the drive and passion of a prosecuting attorney. Right. And so again, if I put on somebody else's hat and kind of look at her, I can see sort of the appeal at times. But what is she best known for? I mean, a lot of people will say it's sexism that kept her from advancing. I don't think that's true at all. I think she's deeply off-putting. I think she alienated a lot of people. The Get Out of My Effing Shot was one of many things where she was an off-putting person. And she's best known for, besides that, she's best known for abusing congressional witnesses and lecturing them with a whiteboard. I just think at the end of the day...
And the Batgirl costume.
And the Batgirl costume. I just think at the end of the day, nobody wants that. She's just unpleasant, it just seems like. And, I mean, I could go on for policy reasons, but I think people just don't like her. We always hear about the candidate you would most like to have a beer with, and I think sometimes that becomes a cliche where you just hear it so much, and there's limits to how much you're willing to go for someone who just seems likable. But she is just so unlikable, and I don't know. And again, I've said this a few times. I just think ultimately Becerra just seemed like the safe choice after she kind of had her misstep, after Swalwell,
did his thing.
I just think Becerra's the safe, generic Democrat choice, and Porter's not.
Well, I think to use a cliche, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And that, her yelling at Julie Watts, her screaming at the staff, the look in her eyes, the way that she talked to them, belittled them, really was dehumanizing to the staff. That says a lot.
It does say a lot, and actually, that's one of the things that I haven't heard people make the case a lot. And I think particularly with Democratic voters, I think with all voters, but particularly Democrats are on the side of labor, and you see your boss humiliating you and yelling at you when the staffer was trying to save her and warn her about using incorrect talking points.
Which we know from the legislature is an everyday occurrence there.
Yeah, I mean, she's trying to help her out. And a normal person, especially knowing that you're on camera, which is the part that's really crazy,
Right.
a normal politician would have just said, oh, thank you.
Yes.
You know, and then maybe given them a hard time afterwards, like,
Right.
don't interrupt my shot ever again.
Right.
But you know, for anybody who's ever worked for someone doesn't like being abused. But I think for Democrats in particular, who are so on the side of labor, who are so on the side of the proletariat, they see that and they're like, just reminded them of every horrible boss they've ever had.
That's right. That's right. Well, we will talk more about our march toward the Becerra era next week. So the other main race that captured the attention of the nation, probably more so than the governor's race, was the race for LA mayor. And, you know, we had some very interesting polling numbers in recent days, you know, and the big question, right, was, well, how real is the Spencer Pratt phenomenon? Is it an internet thing?
Yeah.
Or is it for real? And I think we saw with the vote that we've seen thus far, there's some realness to it. Although I would caution our friends that we're seeing on Twitter are already proclaiming Karen Bass is going to be taken down by Pratt in November. Well, let's not go that far. The return so far, Karen Bass is at about 34, almost 35%. And really, to me, looking at that,
It's a remarkable showing, actually.
it's a remarkably bad showing.
But it outperformed where I thought she would be.
Yes, but it shows when you're a mayor of Los Angeles, you should be getting 70 or 80% of the vote in your reelection. And we saw in the polls, she never broke 25%. And that she actually polled at the ballot box pretty close to that shows this is a very unpopular incumbent who isn't persuading the voters that she deserves a second term. But as we know from working in politics, there's two questions to getting elected when you're going against an incumbent. Do we want to fire the incumbent, and do we want to hire you to replace them? I think voters are kind of there on, do we want to fire the incumbent? The question is, who of her challengers do we want to hire to replace them, if any of them? Spencer Pratt, as of this taping, has polled about 4 points behind her at about 30%, and that's kind of in line with where he was showing in the polls in recent days. Nithya Raman is about 7 points behind him, I think, as of this taping. Now, this is one where the red mirage, as it might be called, may show up. You know, it's probably those are the two that are going to the general election. But again, in the city of LA, you may have these late votes, these late blue votes could be very blue. It could be enough blue to help her catch up. Certainly the margin between the two of them is going to narrow. What do you make of the Spencer Pratt showing? Is this a real deal that Karen Bass should take seriously going into November, or did she get the opponent that she wants to guarantee her reelection in November?
I think she got the opponent she wants. I think that she will probably win. I've thought that the whole time. Because LA is a Democrat town. Republicans are 15% roughly of voter registration. Now, of course, there's NPP, but Republicans don't even compete there. There's there's one supervisor who's Republican, but that's nonpartisan.
And not really in the city.
And not really in the city. There's no besides that, there's no real other elected, besides like people on city councils. Mm-hmm. There's really no Republicans elected. I think Suzette Valadares, the senator, might have a sliver of Los Angeles County. Mm-hmm. But it's really like Republicans just don't get elected there. But I think you're right that he's not a typical Republican candidate. Mm-hmm. So he could have some crossover appeal. The question is how much. You know, asking people who voted Nithya Raman, who is a Democratic Socialist candidate,
Might be a communist,
might be a communist, right? Which in Los Angeles is not a bad word.
right?
Assuming that they are going to go, they hate Karen Bass so much that they're going to go elect someone that is kind of viewed as a Trump Republican, even though maybe that's debatable. It's just a real leap of logic for them to be like, well, I usually like socialism and single payer, but now I'm going to go for this guy who hates all of those things. I mean, it just seems like a real leap of logic, and it would be a massive wave event that would have to happen. I think enough people are paying attention to the race that Spencer Pratt could defy like turnout model, right? Because the general election here in the midterms, historically speaking, is going to be good for Democrats. It just always favors the out of party power from the president. So he could defy that a little bit, and he's got a good campaign message. I think people know Los Angeles is really underperforming. I think people have seen the abysmal response to the wildfires. I think Karen Bass, everyone remembers the stare of her on the tarmac, just like not knowing what is happening while the city was burning down. So I think he has some sort of appeal, but like he's at what, 30% right now, something like that. I mean, where does the other 51% or 21% come from? To me, it just remains very unclear.
That's right. It's where he has potential, right, is that this is not an R versus D race. They're not debating abortion policy or taxes or environmentalism. It's about, number one, basic competence of Karen Bass. And people's anger about these core quality of life issues are really the competence of Karen Bass and her team to run the city. And typically when you are having a campaign against an incumbent, it's a referendum on the incumbent.
Yeah.
So the election is going to be dominated by what she's done, the stare seen around the world, right? What happened in the wildfire aftermath. The one-stop center, but we didn't do anything to alleviate the bureaucracy inside the one-stop center. All of those things, and there's raw nerves throughout the city on that issue, and he's touching those nerves. We've seen the polling, though, to echo your point, that there's a limit to this. So the initial polling, right, they pitted Bass against Pratt or Rahman against Pratt. He was about 20 points behind in both of those matchups. Now, if you're a Republican losing by 20 points in the mayorship of LA, you would take that any day of the week. That's a huge victory. If Steve Hilton loses the city of LA by 20 points, we might call him governor. That's how important that is. Now going forward, what's interesting, right, is that Pratt has the ability to move people, regular people, people who aren't political people at all. The communities where he's welcomed in. I listened to his hour-long interview with Bill Maher the other day, and yes, he definitely kind of clings to a few things, but he's surprisingly more on point and takes down, political people, a mayor like Karen Bass, right, are kind of, can be kind of pompous in the way we talk about things, kind of arrogant, and, well, you couldn't possibly deal with that. And the response is quite simple. You have all the experience in the world, and look what you did with the city. I think, too, that another issue that could hurt Bass going forward, when you look at her, when you watch her, look at her body language, look at her facial expressions. We need the Bill O'Reilly body language expert for this one here. You can tell she's not used to being cross-examined. She's not used to being held accountable. And she's got to get some better answers to why are things the way they are? Why did they happen this way on your watch? What are you going to do better going forward? She doesn't really have an answer to that. You see her with press conferences and check presentations, and I'm going to launch a task force in the next term. Well, why didn't you do more than that and actually have accomplishments on these issues in your first term? But I think Pratt versus Bass, they each got the opponent they wanted. Because I think that Ramon beats Bass, Ramon beats Pratt in a general election, maybe handily so. Maybe it's more kind of the traditional red versus blue. I think in this case you have two kind of, not A-plus candidates. They both got some warts. I think it's going to be a fascinating race, and I think the traditional way we look at campaigns, you can't really apply that to this race.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think too, though, that Bass, like Becerra, has such an institutional advantage that I think, for the most part,
And what is that advantage?
significant voter registration advantage. It's a Democrat town. They like Democrats at least more than Republicans. And, Bass is the incumbent too, which means she has all the levers of power. She has everyone in the city. She has the unions on her side. She has anybody that has any vested interest in the city is going to be on her side. So I would expect her, like Becerra, to probably not do too much. She might have to do a little bit more because she is so vulnerable. But I mean, maybe you'll see a debate at 9
I doubt
a.m.
you're going to see a debate.
Yeah.
I don't think she wants to debate ever again.
Yeah, you might be right. And then lots of press releases about how she's greenlit some project, or she's doing an executive order to ban ICE from the city or something like that. Lots of press releases on stuff that probably isn't viable or relevant. And you, like Hilton, though, Pratt is really good at attracting attention and campaigning in a very provocative way.
And reminding you of what you're most frustrated about in the city.
I'm not always so high on outsider candidates. I will say one thing about Pratt that I really, really appreciate is he has a message and he sticks to it. He has really tremendous message discipline. He's not just like taking all these shots and saying whatever he wants. I mean, he does a little bit, but he has his couple things, as you said, and he really sticks to them. And yeah, it's a little bit boring at times, but from a campaigning perspective, it's the way to go. You have your talking points. You have what you're going to say. This is the campaign for the next couple months. This is all I'm going to talk about publicly, and I'm just going to hammer it home. And for a first-time candidate, he is exceptional at that. And I think that might be part of the reason why he seems to be captivating so many people.
I see a little of the spirit that propelled Arnold Schwarzenegger to the governorship in him, especially with regular people. He has that kind of regular person connection where, these are guys that are pretty well off, but yet they're one of the bros.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another interesting point, when talking about Bass, and there's been a lot of comparisons made to the governor's race, and it's not actually a point in her favor, where someone has said that Javier Becerra would be the Karen Bass of running for governor.
Did I say that?
You might have said that.
I think I might have said that yesterday.
Yes.
I think that's 100% accurate. I think Becerra is going to be an absolute dud in a way that I think he's going to be worse than Newsom.
There's a question of what does he want to
talent.
do, right? There's a question of what's your agenda? And his agenda is, I want to be elected governor.
And Newsom has a story
Yep.
that he wants to tell. I don't buy it, but a lot of people do.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah, he's got a certain charisma to him that Becerra does not. He's a charisma black hole. He's where charisma goes to die. And Newsom is really good at, he's a San Francisco politician. He's a San Francisco mayor. He is really good at, I don't want to say abusing his power, but like wielding his power. And I don't think Becerra has any idea. I think he's just going to go there and get pushed around by public employee unions for the most part, enviro groups. And I think whereas Newsom, and particularly his predecessor, Jerry Brown, were decent enough backstops from the legislature, I don't think Becerra is going to try to fight anything. I think he's just going to go along with whatever.
Let's talk for 1 minute before we close our talk on the mayor's race of what should we expect if the impossible happens and Ramon catches up and makes the runoff? What would a Bass versus Ramon runoff be? I think she's on a glide to the mayor's office if she makes the runoff.
I think it'll be closer because she is a flawed candidate. Because they're both Democrats. Democrats have to be a little bit more discerning because they're the differences are going to be more subtle. But she's young, enthusiastic, pretty. All these things kind of matter in front of a TV, and especially in Los Angeles. And she has a lot of those socialist ideas that people in Los Angeles like. I think it would be closer than. I think it would probably be within. I think she could maybe get 55, something like that. Which is like a 10-point margin, but
Right.
I don't think it would be like some landslide victory, but I think it would be significant and probably more than just a couple votes.
Yeah. I think if a Bass is struggling to deal with a Spencer Pratt, she really wouldn't know how to deal with being hit from the left for week after week after week.
And she'd have to actually engage with Ramon.
She would have to engage with her. And, even though Ramon's a very flawed candidate, that debate, really, if she does lose to Pratt, it's because she looked so horrible in that debate. You should, viewers, go on and Google that debate and watch it. She looked very scattered, very unprepared. And Spencer Pratt had a great point. She's complaining about all these things, what she can't do on homelessness. And she's the chair of the committee that deals with housing and homelessness. If not her, who could do this? But I think she would give her real fits in the general election, and I think Karen Bass would lose.
Yeah, the one thing I think holding back Spencer Pratt is the fact that he's Republican. Ramon obviously doesn't have that problem, so I think it's a lot easier for Los Angeles voters, partisan voters, to vote for Ramon because at that point they don't really care. They just want to vote for a Democrat. And it takes a little bit more to go and vote for someone of the other party if you are a regular partisan voter.
So let's talk in our final minutes this week about some of the other races on the ballot. I'm going to make an executive decision and say that really the rest of the statewide races weren't that interesting. So I'm not going to spend much time on that.
We can talk about it another time when maybe we'll bring on Greenhut for this, but the way the insurance commissioner race is shaping up, it is a real travesty. But we can talk about that another time because that requires explanation.
That's right, and experts in insurance far better than us. But I think the most interesting other races from Tuesday were the hot congressional races in the state. And if I have an overall theme for them, it's that it was a very bad night for House Democrats. We came into this election post-gerrymander, expecting we're going to have a 48-4 Democrat congressional delegation. And if you look at the results, we have now this could change, this is as of halftime, but you have in Congressional District 6, I think it is, Kevin Kiley running as an NPP, leaving the Republican Party. There was a no-name, though maybe anti-Semitic, Republican challenger. And then you had several Democratic contenders. And there was even talk of, well, maybe you'd have two Democrats in the general election in that race. As of now, we're gearing toward, you might have Kiley and the Republican. If that happens, if that holds up, there is going to be tens of millions of dollars raised overnight to put top 2 repeal on the ballot. Then you see in the 1st Congressional District, you had the special election for the old line seat that was left vacant by the death of our friend Doug LaMalfa. James Gallagher, our first guest, overwhelmingly was elected to that seat, so he'll be an incumbent running for re-election. The new seat, which is much more Democratic friendly, was drawn as a safe Democratic seat. And if you look at the numbers, it's a winnable race for Gallagher. It's still going to require some effort, but the returns right now, if you look at it, it's like 52-48 if you add up the Democrats and you add up the Republican vote. That's not a sure thing at all, Mike McGuire has his work cut out for him in the general election. This is not going to be a cakewalk for them. Then you go down south to Congressional District 22. Democrats have always wanted, it's Lucy and Charlie Brown with the football. It's a heavily Latino seat. David Valadao, our friend, has been in that seat for most of the past decade or so. He's running again. He wins every time. They've tried the best candidates in the world. They lose every time. This time, Washington Democrats recruited Assemblymember Jasmeet Baines, who's a very moderate Democrat, a doctor, in a year where Democrats want to run on health care and Valadao's health care votes. Well, a Bernie Sanders AOC supported progressive named Villegas, who is on the school board in Visalia, I believe. It appears that he's won and made the top two. That almost guarantees the re-election of David Valadao. So you look at that top to bottom, and you're thinking, this isn't the great night that is shaping up to be in November for House Democrats to gain all these seats from California. It's going to be a real, much bigger fight than they anticipated it will be.
The ISA seat, too, is way more competitive than they had hoped it would be.
That's right. That
as of this moment.
As of this moment.
If ballots return and they come back, every point that a candidate gets in a one versus one is doubles, right? Because if you go up 1 point, the other opponent goes down 1 point. So it's like you keep widening the lead. So if, right now a lot of these races are marginal, right? Like 50-50. If the returns skew Democratic 3%, something like that, that puts a pretty good buffer in there for a lot of these candidates. But I am a Congressional District 6 voter, and I am so happy to see this awful gerrymandering plan possibly flounder. Although I don't want to spike the football just yet. I want to see it. Fall flat on its face first. But gerrymandering is bad. It's bad happening in Republican states. It's bad happening here. It just breeds cynicism at a time we don't need to be any more cynical about elections. And I'm happy to see just overtly political, cynical plans hopefully blowing up.
And even if Richard Pan does make the top two, he has had a propensity to underperform in the big races, and Kevin Kiley is going to be a very, very competitive candidate against him in the general election, and we might even declare him the slight favorite going into the general election against him.
Yeah, so it was funny because, like I said, I'm a voter in that district. Kevin Kiley is the incumbent, and there was another Republican who, and I'm a registered Republican voter, so.
I'm shocked to hear that.
Yes, but I didn't get one bit of. I didn't even know who this other candidate was. I actually thought Kiley was running without a Republican in the race, and when voting, I didn't even see this guy's name on it. And then I looked him up today when I found out there was going to be possibly 2 Republicans getting through. And I looked him up, and the only thing I could find about him was his campaign committee is called the Contra-Zionist Committee. And, I mean, it's just not... if this guy goes against Richard Pan, he's going to lose because he's going to turn off a lot of people who don't want to see the country of Israel just wiped off the face of the earth. I thought that was a lot more of a majority opinion. It's becoming less and less of a majority opinion. Who knows? Maybe that guy will pick up a lot of progressive voters because they seem to hate Israel as well.
He seems to be in line with the key Democratic platform these days.
Yeah, he's the progressive in the race. But, I think if, it's Pan versus Kiley, I think you're right. Kiley, again, as an independent, sort of has his work cut out for him. And Richard Pan, listeners might remember, is hated by Republicans because of his staunch, aggressive vaccine policies. Not that vaccines aren't great. Vaccines are great. But he wanted, he was just so aggressive with everyone getting vaccinated all the time, vaccinated. And so that turns off a lot of Republican voters. So there's something to be said for someone who so heavily he doesn't really motivate his own base, but he highly motivates the other base. So that could be actually be really interesting. Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for, I guess, is the moral of that story. Well, with that, that's our halftime report on the 2026 California primary. Maybe we'll have the 3/4 report next week at this time.
We have only, 37 more days to go
Only
until the ballots are
37 more
certified?
days. I mean, I'm sure you were not the only one who had a deep sigh when you looked at your first election return last night and it says in big letters, 37 days to go. We got to do better, and maybe we'll explore how we can do better counting the votes next time on Next Round. So for my friend Matt Fleming, I'm Tim Anaya. Thank you for joining us for Next Round, and we hope you'll join us again next week for another edition. Take care.